Thank you so much, Mr. Connors. I appreciate very much you holding this hearing this afternoon. And thank you and Congressman Ridgell, Maloney, and Amelia for what you've done. Certainly thank my friend Mike Thompson for the extraordinary work he's doing on the task force. John Connors, of course, has been a fighter for the good and the just as long as I've been in Congress. Elizabeth Esty is new here. Jackie Spear, I just realized when she walked in, Jackie herself was a victim of gunshots in Johnstown, and we're so happy to have her here again today. This is a very, very sad day for us, as Carolyn Maloney pointed out. It was scarcely 10 days after Newtown when our hearts were broken and we were going through absolute anguish in Rochester, New York, and where West Webster is, when our first responders were set up in an ambush. We could hardly believe it. It made absolutely no sense. The gun laws, as we know, have been ineffective and doing anything about it. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill that you have. Stopping the straw purchase of guns would have been part of the solution, and the young two men here on the wall would still be alive, and Ted and his friend Hostetter would not have been shot. As in addition, I should say that the killer also murdered his sister and left her body to burn in the house. The man was, by all accounts, not able to be owner of guns. It was a Ted, and he will tell you what happened on that terrible day. But let me just tell you that our first responders are so important to us. And remind us that it's in our hands. In many ways, your lives are in our hands now. Depends on the kind of legislation that Congress passes, whether you can be safer or not. And I would take that, as I'm sure all my colleagues do, as a very serious obligation. Ted's a volunteer firefighter with the West Webster Fire Department. And he has selflessly dedicated his career to service of his friends and neighbors. He spent years responding to emergencies and repeatedly rushed toward danger when others run away. He and his wife Karen came down this morning, because we have such wretched travel arrangements from Rochester. They had to come down at 6 o'clock this morning and be here till 9 o'clock this evening. So when we get through leaving here, I want to take him over to my office and make sure he and Karen get some food and he gets to rest a little bit. So don't keep him too long, if you don't mind. Far too often, the service of first responders is taken for granted. Not only do they risk their lives in order to help others, but they sacrifice their own family holidays. And chief among those, I think, was Tomas. There, he was 19 years old. As his brother pointed out, he couldn't even have a beer with him because he was too young. Tomas was working on Christmas Eve because he wanted another firefighter to be able to be home with his children. And he literally gave his life for others. In a moment, Ted will tell you about all that, but one other thing I need to say is I should never forget in my lifetime the picture of Mike Ciavarini's 6-year-old daughter holding the hand of her older brother at the funeral. I'm sure with everything that had gone on before in school, and then the loss of her father, whom she dearly loved, how difficult it had to be with the whole holiday season for all of us in Rochester was wrapped up in pain and suffering and trying to understand in some way, if we could, what in the world was happening in America. But we know that the gunman who took the lives of his sister and firefighters and tore up the lives of Tess Gardino and Joe Hostetter obtained his gun through the straw purchase. He'd been sentenced, as Roger Cummings says, to 17 years in prison for killing his grandmother with a hammer. And certainly then he was prohibited from purchasing a gun after he was paroled in 1996. But he recruited a young woman, about 20 years old, who had lived in the neighborhood, to go to the gun store with him. And as you know, he picked out the Bushmaster and shotgun. And then he was armed with whatever he needed to do, or whatever he felt in his tortured mind somehow that he wanted to do. He seemed to have some grief, some beef that he had with the firefighters. We don't know exactly why. But he felt perfectly capable and fine to take the lives of two of them, shoot at more, and upend the whole community and change lives forever. But I think that happened and because we had not proper laws to protect it. Isn't it our duty really to pass the kind of laws that will protect not only our constituents, many of them are the first responders? I think that it is. I urge Congress to pass the laws today, and I appreciate what the Senate is doing also in a bipartisan manner, and I'm so happy to see us doing that here today. I'd like to welcome Ted and thank him again for coming to share his story. I know it's not an easy thing to interrupt his own recovery, his rehabilitation, to take this trip down here to share with us what was really a harrowing experience. Took the lives of two of his good friends and it changed his life forever. And Ted, I hope that this testimony will help inspire Congress to pass this Prevention Act. And we need to do all we can to prevent the gun tragedies like the one that we experienced on December 24th from ever happening again. Thank you and welcome, Ted.
Thank you very much.